Hello from Greenwich, Connecticut. It is very chilly. It is sunny, and there's so much snow here. I don't remember last time it was this snowy, but it is beautiful. Yeah, so everybody take care, don't slip. And Lisa just made it. Hello, Lisa, our executive producer just walked in. On the show today, I'm very excited to have Julie Roginsky. She's returning. She was one of our very first guests on our first show with Jim Himes back in May, and I'm a big follower of her. She has a newsletter on Substack called Salty Politics. And every time I read it, Julie, welcome on the show.
Thank
You
you.
blow me away. You're so articulate. You just nail all the topics and you put them in a form that we can really digest. And so I kind of want to start today with your most recent. I read it this morning and it's entitled We're Winning. So help me out because I felt so discouraged this weekend. Oh my gosh, another person died, Alex Pretty. And what's going on with this whole administration, and how can we live through a moment where one of our US citizens was shot point blank on the streets of Minnesota, dead. I still can't understand how we all can digest this.
Look, what's happening right now, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm really so happy to be back and to see you. I would say that it's always darkest before dawn.
Mm.
And we saw over the weekend with Alex Preddy was something that I think we'd never expect to see on the streets of the United States. Although it's happened before, so I don't know why we're shocked. I mean, the whole civil rights movement is littered with the bodies of brave men and women who stood up and did the right thing, much like Alex Preddy did. But what we saw on Saturday was the execution, and that's the only way to describe it, of a man in cold blood. There's nothing more to it, and anybody who refers to it as a murder or as a death is not doing justice to what happened to Alex Preddy. He was executed by a bunch of untrained thugs who, because of their sheer anger or because of their adrenaline or for whatever hatred was
Immunity, giving
immunity,
immunity, confidence.
because they were allowed to do it and because they knew that they would be protected because the man who shot Renee Good in cold blood just 2 weeks earlier was protected, understood that there would be no consequences for murdering and assassinating and executing somebody in cold blood on the streets of one of America's great cities. And that's exactly what happened. I think all of us were shocked, but all of us have been shocked for a long time. And I think people
Mm.
with conscience have been shocked for a very long time. What I think the Trump administration did not count on was that their own allies would be shocked. And I have some theories about
Mm.
that. Renee Good was, uh, and as they keep calling her, a lesbian. So she was a woman and she was a gay woman, and therefore she was a little lesser than
Mm-hmm.
all of the people who've died in ICE custody, and there have been many, are Latino and they are lesser than. But here you have a white man from the Midwest who looks just like every other white man from the Midwest
Mm-hmm.
being executed in broad daylight by the United States government at taxpayer expense. And that, I think, shocked not just all of us into just conscience, although none of us
Mm-hmm.
see that to have been shocked for the last year. But it also shocked a lot of people who Donald Trump relies on, right? It shocked people who are not necessarily woke liberals that they always complain about. You had Chris Madell, the Minnesota Republican gubernatorial candidate, who had just 2 weeks earlier lent his help to the man who had murdered Renee Good
That's
and
right.
was running again as a Republican in Minnesota. He dropped out of the race, dropped out of the Republican Party at this, and said, I'm going to read a quote here because I think it's important. He told the Wall Street Journal, he did a very long video explaining why, but he also told the Wall Street Journal later, I can't look my daughters in the eye and say I'm running as
Mm.
a Republican when they're pulling over Hispanics and Asians because of the color of the skin and what they look like. I did not sign up for that. And then he added, and this is important, United States citizens, particularly those of color, live in fear. United States citizens are carrying papers to prove their citizenship. That's wrong. You had Jim Comer, who is one of Trump's biggest acolytes, who was on the House Oversight Committee, the chair of the House Oversight Committee, put out told Fox News on Sunday in very passive aggressive terms, slamming Minnesota and slamming Democrats, but nevertheless basically saying that ICE should pull out of Minnesota. You have a bunch of Republican senators and not just the usual suspects saying ICE has to change tactics, has to change course, including people like Ted Cruz. I mean, that's something to really think about. You have the Wall Street Journal.
Low bar.
Yeah, I mean, listen, the Wall Street Journal wrote on Monday,
Yes.
yesterday, that, Stephen Miller's quote, mass deportation methods are turning immigration, an issue Mr. Trump owned in 2024, into political liability for Republicans in 26. Americans don't want law enforcement shooting people in the street or arresting 5-year-old boys. The president who said you have to have a heart in enforcement ought to show some. I mean, that's when you begin to see a shift. Because what these people are saying, and let's be very clear, I don't think they particularly care that somebody died. I don't think they care that 5-year-old boys are being
No, they don't.
rounded up and sent thousands of miles away from their mother, despite the fact that they were here legally. They asked for asylum at the border and were granted asylum. There is no reason on earth as to why this should be happening to little Liam, a 5-year-old boy. But they're doing this because they see the majority slipping away. And they see immigration, which is the issue they wanted to run on, now becoming an albatross around their necks. And they're seeing that this big scandal in Minnesota that had to do with misappropriation of COVID funding that they thought was going to be a silver bullet in the Midwest, so the back seat to the fact that they're murdering people in the streets and kidnapping children away from their parents.
I think what you're saying is incredibly important. First of all, you're saying use the right language. This was an execution, correct? Right. Secondly, the person who was executed was a white male, cisgendered, able-bodied person who was actually carrying a concealed weapon, and he did not pull it out. It was removed from him, and then he was shot at point blank. He was on his knees. He was shot in the back. And then you have an administration trying to tell people, don't believe your eyes. We're going to continue to lie to you. And I think we finally are seeing a shift here from people saying, this is too much. I mean, we got a little bit of it with Renee Good, but this time, given all the angles, and I think part of what you were saying too in one of your essays was, this is how we resist iPhones. All of that video. And you've got one. Me too.
We all have one. But, I have to say, and I wrote about this as well, Trevor, and I think maybe we'll get around to talking about this, but I want to just bring this up. On the very same day that Alex Preddy used his iPhone, I think it was an iPhone, to document what was happening to people in Minnesota, and that ICE decided that that was the weapon that they were worried about. It wasn't his gun. They didn't even know he had a gun. It was his phone. That was the weapon they feared. On that very same day, the person who sold him that phone, if you want to say the drug dealer who sold him the drugs, the person who sold him the phone that got him killed, Tim Cook, was at the White House betting Melania Trump for her ridiculous 40 million bribe, / documentary. And there's a massive disconnect here between a man lying dead in the streets of Minneapolis because of his iPhone, bleeding out, while the purveyor of that iPhone is hobnobbing with the people who murdered him. And I want to just put that in perspective, because I'm not one of those people who is like down with the oligarchy and, rich people don't deserve, like, I don't believe in that. I think that's ridiculous class warfare, and I'm not going to engage in that. But if they've gotten me to start believing something to that, where there's a massive disconnect here, that a man whose blood was still on the sidewalk, who'd been shot 3 times in the back and 10 times overall because of his iPhone, was lying dead while the person who sold him that iPhone did not have the wherewithal to say, you know what, maybe today's not a good day for me to go to the White House and hang out with these people.
As you said in your essay, this is a moral collapse. It really is. What are the people who are running our biggest companies? In fact, we're on Zoom right now, and one of the people at that event was Eric Yuan, I don't know his name, the CEO of Zoom. There were many of them, as Nelly. You mentioned it's truly at what point do you start saying this is horrendous? It's not okay. This is not who we are as U.S. citizens. And how do we continue to support this? We're the oligarchs. If we're just quiet about this, what
Well, it's
happens?
more than that, right? Like Erica Kirk was at the White House on
Oh,
Saturday night. And I have
of
to say,
course.
for a woman that is monetized, and I want to say monetized, her husband's death, because within 2 seconds of his death, she was hosting Turning Point events where literally the Chiron, the underneath the performance was text blah 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 for swag. So the whole thing is basically a complete huckster operation to make money for whoever.
Rift.
It's a total grift. You know, you just had a husband murdered in cold blood. Alex Preddy, I don't know whether he was married, doesn't sound like it, but had parents who loved him, had a sister who loved him. We saw that. Had family and friends who loved him, had an entire hospital, VA hospital that
Mm,
I don't know if you saw that footage of him, of his casket wrapped in an American flag, being draped in an American flag, being paraded
mm,
past
sad.
the very people whom he helped and worked with. I mean, this man was clearly loved and admired, much like Charlie Kirk was loved and admired by his
People.
fault, by his
Yeah.
people. And I can only imagine the reaction if the night that Charlie Kirk had been murdered, if Joe Biden had been,
Mm,
if there were some big glitzy champagne-soaked party honoring Jill Biden for some, the cover of Vogue or whatever she was on, and what the reaction would have been. And
hmm
would Erica Kirk have castigated whoever showed up that day? And meanwhile, here she is
hmm
showing up to the White House when the body's still not cold. It's just, to me, it's so tone deaf, and it just underscores that the entire thing is a grift. Whether it's Tim Cook, who worries about the share, Tim Cook is trying to pacify himself by saying, I have to do this because if I don't do this, if I
mm,
don't bend, the knee, if I don't kiss the ring, they're going to impose tariffs on my, iPhone components, and then I'm not going to be able to sell iPhones anymore, and it's going to cost $3,000 for an iPhone. Like, I get all of that. I get that Amazon had to pay, felt they had to pay a 40 million with an M dollar bribe to
hmm
Melania Trump for the life rights to her story, which I'm pretty sure they didn't get the whole story
No,
because
no, I don't think that whole story's in
yeah,
there.
I don't think that whole story. We'll see about the Epstein files. Maybe they'll get the whole
Yeah,
story,
it
but
might be in there.
yeah, it may be in there. We don't know. I'm not saying that
Mail
it is.
order bride.
Yeah, I'm not saying it is, but um, but although I'll tell you, I've been to Slovenia and it's a lovely country, and she
Mm,
better off staying there than hooking up with Donald Trump, but to each their own. I would say this, they have a choice. And it used to be that they cared about the consumer and they cared about public opinion,
hmm
cared about public reaction, but now they don't. They only care about an audience of one.
Yeah,
And that audience of one is the President of the United States. That's not capitalism, friends.
nope,
That's something else.
nope.
That's a planned economy that takes place in the halls of power.
Yeah, yeah.
So I just want to be clear about what we're dealing with here.
I'm sure Tim Cook would say to you, I'm just maximizing shareholder value. If I'm bending the knee, this is the whole reason for it, just to make sure, as you're saying, sell these funds. Yet it's there some point, and I believe Kara Swisher called about, yeah, I think it was yesterday. She was like, "Can you imagine what Steve Jobs would be thinking right now about this? That this man is dead in the streets, and you go to the White House to celebrate this? Like, who is Steve Jobs? He would never have
I
supported
don't
that.
know. I don't know the Steve
We don't
Jobs.
know.
Steve Jobs wasn't the best man on earth either, but
No, he was not.
but I will say this. That's exactly what they're saying, right? We have to do this. We have to do this. Okay, so let's play this out to its logical conclusion. I think that Democrats, for the most part, will not vote for another Joe Biden who wants to return to norms because we understand the norms do not exist anymore. They've been completely blown up.
Mm-hmm.
Stupid to
Mm-hmm.
say we're going to return to norms, as you would have said after World War II, we're going to return to the norms of the pre-war order,
No.
right? Or even better, after World War One. Like the empires are dead, the Tsar has been murdered,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Gilded Age is over.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the Gilded Age is over. It's over, right? The Austrian, the Habsburg Empire has collapsed, so so with it a lot of other things. So, like, we're not going to return back to what it used to be. So let's play this out to its logical conclusion. Let's say that Democrats elect somebody who's going to be just like Donald Trump, because Democrats are going to say, you know what, screw this. You took your pound of flesh, now we're going to take our pound of flesh.
Mm-hmm.
Is Tim Cook now going to have to bend the knee to that guy or that woman? And that person is going to say, hey, Tim Cook, unless you give a $20 million bribe,
A vig.
a VIG, to, because for whatever reason that Apple will decide that Apple has to do it, or hey, Amazon,
Mm-hmm.
unless you create a documentary, a hagiography about the next first lady, you're not going to be able to get the post office to do anything for you at a cut rate price. And how far is this going to go? Because that's not, again, I keep going back to this, that's not capitalism. That's something else entirely.
Stepping away from rules
Yeah.
based, the rule of law society where there is accountability. And no, this is all about power, leverage, and what am I going to hold over your head, right? And right now, it looks like that strategy is winning or not. Actually, because I want to come back to your article this morning that was entitled "We're Winning," because we do. I really want people to understand that resistance counts. But if we do play that line of thought out, what sort of presidential candidate do we need as Democrats to win this race to power and it is already oligarchy? But what are we going to do?
Look, I'll speak for myself. I am not in any conciliatory mood after all of this. I am not in any, and I just want to be clear, I came up through the Democratic organizations of my life. So I used to be as kind of mainstream as it gets, I guess. I don't know how else to describe it. I'm a former Senate staffer. Like, I can't be more sort of mainstream. I'm not that anymore. I'm not
Mm,
that anymore. I want justice. Some people might call it revenge. I call it justice.
mm, mhm,
And I am not kidding. I want to know from the next presidential nominee, and people are going to be very appalled at this because it's just not how it's done. And we've never done
mhm.
this way before. And actually, I have something coming out on this tomorrow, so you guys can have a preview. But um, I'm not in the mood to be conciliatory, and I want to know the following from whoever I'm going to cast my vote for the Democratic nomination. Who is your attorney general going to be? I want to
Mhm.
know that today. Who are you going to ask to be your attorney general? And I want to know if that attorney general is going to indict Kristi Noem on day one.
Thank you.
And I want to know if that person is going to indict Pete Hegseth on day one for
Mhm.
violating, obviously putting all of our military secrets on
On signal
signal. Uh,
slash
I want to know,
shooting
I
people who
want
are
to
in the
know, yep,
water.
I want to know if Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is going to
Mm,
be indicted for causing mass death, which he is on the cusp of doing now with his measles outbreak and his anti-vaccine nonsense. Like, I want indictments. And that's not weaponizing government. That is called justice, and that's called accountability. And if that's how they're going to play the game, they always expect Democrats to just, well, Democrats will never do this because Democrats will want to go back to norms, and Democrats want to go back to this and that. And no, I don't believe that norms exist anymore. And there are so many demands that I have as a Democratic voter, and my vote's just one vote, but I'm sure I'm not alone. I have a list of demands of our next Democratic president, and it's not tweeting like Gavin Newsom is, like Trump, about Trump, and it's
mhm,
not, it's not kind of a shot. It's not the finger wagging and the letter writing. It's none of that.
mhm,
It's
mhm.
not the peace and love, and I'm going to give speeches on the floor of the Senate for 26 hours about the civil rights movement. Like, screw that.
Like,
I'm
I
not
want robust, strong,
like
bold.
I'm not in the mood. I'm not in the mood because I want these people to understand. I want a Nuremberg style trial, and I don't mean that they have to all be hanged because I don't believe in the death penalty, but I want real accountability. I want Kristi Noem in the dock as
Mhm.
the first order of business, unless Trump
And
pardons.
the names of the people that just shot Alex Pretty.
I
And I
want
want all those people to understand that this immunity they've been sort of vaguely given doesn't mean that it's going to last. There
Yeah,
is accountability down the road. You
uh,
shoot somebody in cold blood in the
I
middle of the
want,
day.
yeah, I want their names. I want Pam Bondi. charged with not releasing the Epstein files, clearly violating a
Breaking the
law,
law.
a law that was passed by almost unanimously, with the exception of one vote, and signed into law by the President of the United States. I want that. I want indictments there. I want to know what deal Todd Blanche cut with Ghislaine Maxwell to obstruct.
That's
I mean,
right.
there are so many things here that I think are important for us to get to the bottom of. And again, it's not as a matter of revenge, it is as a signal to the next authoritarian who wants to come along that this country will hold them accountable.
And an unredacted list.
Right. This is Lisa. Say that again.
And the unredacted list.
Of course,
Oh,
of
of
course,
course. We need all of
us
it.
yeah,
victims.
of course.
Absolutely.
That goes
Um,
that beyond without saying. And I don't care who's on that list. I don't care if the next president of the United States is on that list. I want that list.
So we have just about 20, 30 seconds left before we have to go to station break. Just sort of leaving this on an upbeat note, because I did like what you were saying about how resistance works.
Yep.
That was important, what we saw in Minnesota. It was very courageous people coming out with their phones, right?
Keep it, listen, I am so blown away as a New Yorker by the courage of the people of Minneapolis and surrounding towns around Minneapolis. I mean, I am so blown away by their courage and their commitment. And this is how it's done, not with violence, not
right.
aggressive behavior, documenting and bearing witness. And even that is too much for this administration. And that's why Alex Preddy was murdered. And
Okay, we have to go to a station break. I appreciate spending time with you, Julie. I learn so much every time I speak to you, and thank you for your incredibly important essays. Everybody, please subscribe to Salty Politics on Substack. So thanks a lot, Julie.
Good to see you. Bye.